Adrian Cole felt something wrong the moment he stepped into the conference room. But he pushed the feeling aside because today was supposed to be the most important day of his career. Sunlight poured in through the tall glass windows, turning the polished table into a glowing runway. The room was filled with quiet murmurs, shifting chairs, and the low buzz of executives preparing for the biggest pitch the company had ever attempted. Adrian had worked for months on this, long nights, missed weekends, silent sacrifices no one saw and no one thanked him for. But he didn't mind. He believed in the deal. He believed in his work. And he believed he was finally close to becoming someone the company couldn't ignore anymore. He adjusted his tie, swallowed the tension building in his throat, and opened his laptop. The presentation flickered onto the screen, revealing the bold number: $72 million. Just that number made his pulse quicken. It wasn't just a pitch. It was proof of everything he had poured into the job since the day he joined. The room slowly quieted as people realized the client had arrived. And Adrian's eyes lifted, and there she was, Cassandra. Vale, she walked in with the confidence of someone used to walking into powerful rooms and instantly owning them. Her dark hair fell in soft waves against her shoulders. Her posture was straight, and her eyes had this sharp focus that made even the most senior partners sit a little taller. But when she looked at Adrian, something gentler appeared, a flicker of curiosity, a warmth that made his chest tighten for reasons he didn't want to name. He had met her once during an earlier meeting, long enough to know she was brilliant and far more human than most people at her level. She listened. She remembered small details. She asked about people, not just numbers. And Adrian respected her more than he could admit. He smiled politely as she took her seat at the center of the table, her gaze holding his for just a moment longer than necessary, enough to steady him, enough to make him want to do well not just for himself, but for her. The partners settled, a few clearing their throats as they pretended they were the reason she was there. But she nodded at Adrian, signaling she was ready, and he began. At first his voice trembled, but once he started explaining the opening slide market trends, projected growth, long-term value, his confidence grew. The words flowed smoothly, quickly, like he had rehearsed them 1,000 times, which he had. His hands moved with natural rhythm, guiding everyone through the idea he had built from scratch. The executives watched him with varying expressions, some intrigued, others annoyed that someone lower in rank was leading a pitch of this size. Adrian didn't care. Not today. Today he had earned this stage. Cassandra took notes, her eyes flicking between him and the screen. She didn't interrupt, didn't act impatient. She simply listened. And somehow it made him feel seen. Then the door opened. The room shifted. A wave of awkward silence rolled across the table as Mara, the HR director, walked in wearing a stiff blazer and an expression that always made people sit up straighter. Her heels tapped loudly against the floor, too loud for a room where every sound mattered. Adrian paused, unsure whether to continue. The partners exchanged looks, whispering under their breaths. Confused by her sudden arrival, no one expected HR to walk into a pitch, especially not this pitch. Mara didn't acknowledge anyone. She glanced at her tablet, then at Adrian, then back down, as if annoyed by his existence. She had always been cold toward him, but never openly hostile. Still, something about the way she walked into the room felt wrong, like she had come for something personal, something deliberate. Adrian cleared his throat and tried to restart the sentence he had lost. But Mara stepped forward and lifted her hand slightly. "Continue," she said in a flat voice. But there was no warmth, no politeness. It was said like an order. Adrian blinked, unsure. Cassandra looked at him questioningly, sensing the tension. But he forced himself to continue, jumping into the next slide faster than he planned. The room felt tighter, the air thinner, as if someone had turned off a comforting sound and replaced it with a quiet static. Halfway through sentence, Mara took a slow breath, and then she spoke the words that shattered everything. "Adrian Cole, HR is terminating your employment effective immediately." For a heartbeat, no one understood what she said. Not even Adrian. The sentence didn't fit with the room or the moment. It didn't belong in a place filled with ambition, strategy, and opportunity. The partners froze. Cassandra's pen slipped from her fingers and clattered against the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the still room. Adrian felt his stomach drop so fast he felt dizzy. His voice cut off mid-word. His mouth went dry. His hands, steady moments earlier, began to tremble again, but not from nerves this time. From disbelief? From humiliation? From a cold sting that went straight to his bones. He swallowed hard. "Are you firing me right now?" His voice cracked in a way he hated. But he couldn't control it. In accordance with HR policy, yes. Mara replied without emotion. "Your access will be removed in the next few minutes." The next few minutes. She said it like it was nothing. Like firing him in the middle of a $72 million pitch. A pitch he created was perfectly normal. The partners looked horrified. Not because they cared about his dignity, but because they knew this was a disaster for the company. Cassandra looked like she couldn't breathe. She leaned forward in her seat, eyes sharp and filled with a mix of shock and anger. "You're firing the lead presenter during a pitch of this scale?" she asked quietly. Her voice was soft, but the room felt it like a shockwave. Mara straightened. This decision was made earlier today and must be executed as soon as possible. The partners rushed to speak. "Mara, we can handle this after the meeting. This isn't the time you're causing a scene." But she shut them down with one cold look. Adrian stepped back from the screen. The glowing $72 million number suddenly mocking him. A symbol of everything he had built, and everything being stripped from him in front of the one person he desperately didn't want to disappoint. He whispered, "Now, you're doing this now? In front of the client?" Mara didn't blink. "Correct?" His chest tightened so hard he had to fight the urge to sit down. His mind was spinning, not just from the humiliation, but from the raw confusion. Why now? Why publicly? Why in front of Cassandra? What had he done to deserve execution in the most painful way possible? He wanted answers, but knew he wouldn't get any. Then he saw Cassandra stand up slowly, gracefully, like every movement was controlled. Her eyes were locked on Mara, filled with icy disbelief. "This is unacceptable. You don't treat a professional like this." Mara shrugged. "Internal matter." "Not when it disrupts my investment," Cassandra replied. Her tone held an authority that made even the partners shift uncomfortably. But Mara didn't back down. Regardless, the termination stands. Adrian felt the walls closing in. He wanted to defend himself, say something, explain something, even though he didn't know what to explain. But his throat was tight, his pulse pounding in his ears. He felt exposed, stripped, betrayed. He forced himself to look at Cassandra. Her expression softened when their eyes met, filled with something he didn't expect. Concern. Real concern. As if his pain mattered to her. As if she saw the small cracks beginning to open inside him. He couldn't stay in that room any longer. Not with all those eyes watching. Not with his dignity falling apart. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the conference room, each step heavy and slow. He kept his head down, forcing himself not to break. Not here. Not in front of them. Behind him. He heard Cassandra call out, "Adrian!" Wait. But her voice was drowned out by the arguing executives, scrambling to fix the disaster. He didn't wait. He kept walking. The hallway outside was quiet, but his mind was chaos. His hands shook as he reached out to steady himself against the wall. His heart felt crushed, not just by the firing, but by the cold public humiliation of it. Everything he built, everything he hoped for, everything he fought for destroyed in seconds. But then Adrian stopped walking only when he reached the far end of the hallway. Away from the glass walls and the heavy voices spilling out of the conference room. He rested his hand on the cool metal railing and tried to breathe, but every breath felt sharp. The humiliation sat in his chest like a stone. He closed his eyes, trying to steady himself. but all he could see was the look on Cassandra's face when Mara fired him. Shock, anger, and something else he didn't understand. Something that made his heart ache even more. He didn't know whether he wanted to scream, collapse, or walk out of the building and never come back. But before he could decide, he heard quick footsteps approaching. He turned and saw Cassandra rushing toward him, her heels clicking fast. Her eyes burning with emotion he had never seen from a client before. As soon as she reached him, she stopped, catching her breath, her hair slightly falling over her face from how quickly she must have walked. "Adrian," she said, her voice low but intense. "What just happened in there?" He shook his head, still struggling to form words. "I don't know. I truly don't know." She stepped closer, her brows drawn together. "This is unacceptable. They humiliated you in front of me, in front of their own executive team. I've never seen such unprofessional behavior." Her anger startled him. He wasn't used to people being upset on his behalf. Most of his life, he had learned how to take blows silently, patch himself up privately, and keep moving like nothing hurt. But Cassandra didn't let him hide. She looked at him as if she could see every wound he was trying to bury. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," he whispered, barely trusting his voice. "Today was supposed to matter. I put everything I had into that pitch." "I know," she said softly. "I saw it." The sincerity in her tone made his throat tighten. He tried to look away, but she gently placed a hand on his arm, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Adrian, this wasn't about your work. It was targeted, deliberate. I could feel it." He swallowed hard. "It feels like a punishment, but I don't even know what I did wrong." Cassandra shook her head. "You did nothing wrong. If anything, you did too well. That pitch was brilliant." She hesitated, her gaze softening. "When you spoke, you made me actually feel something about the project, not just understand it." Her words hit deeper than she knew. Adrian looked away again, trying to hide the emotion in his eyes. "Doesn't matter anymore," he muttered. "I'm out. Just like that. They cut me off like I was nothing." "You aren't nothing," she said sharply, almost angry he would even think that. "Not to this project. Not to what you created. Not to me." He froze. "Not to me." Those three words lingered between them, warm and unexpected, making the air feel different, heavier in a strange and gentle way. Before he could respond, the conference room doors burst open behind them. Several executives rushed out, their faces pale and frantic. They spotted Cassandra immediately and hurried toward her like desperate salesmen chasing a fleeing customer. Ms. Vale, the senior partner, said, voice already shaky, "We apologize for the disruption. Please come back inside. We can continue the presentation without him." Cassandra slowly turned her head, and her expression cooled instantly. The warmth she showed Adrian vanished, replaced by a sharp, icy calm that made the men approaching her slide to a stop. "Continue without him," she said, each word cutting like glass. "The person who built the proposal from start to finish. The only person in the room who knew every detail. The one you just fired in the middle of his own pitch." They exchanged nervous glances. One of them forced a smile. "It was an internal matter. We assure you it won't affect the deal. Won't affect the deal." Cassandra repeated quietly, as if stunned by their stupidity. The men nodded eagerly, hoping she would accept the excuse. But instead, she took a slow step back, placing herself slightly closer to Adrian, almost like a shield. "This was the most disrespectful act I've ever witnessed in a corporate setting," she said. "You didn't simply fire someone. You humiliated him publicly. You sabotaged your own pitch. And you insulted me by expecting I would pretend nothing happened." A layer of panic settled over the executives. The senior partner swallowed hard. "Ms. Vale, we can fix this." "No!" She cut him off. "You can't." The hallway grew painfully quiet. Cassandra raised her chin, her voice steady and cold. "I'm pulling the entire $72 million deal." Every executive froze. Adrian's eyes widened. "Cassandra, You don't have to. Oh, I do, she said without looking at him. I won't work with people who treat loyalty like a burden and talent like disposable clutter. The senior partner looked like he might faint. This decision, it will ruin the quarter. That's not my problem, she replied. But we can hire someone new. I don't want someone new, she snapped. I wanted Adrian. Another stunned silence. Cassandra exhaled, calm again, as if her decision was final and nothing could sway her. You lost the deal the moment you fired him. The executives were speechless. They had no power left in the conversation, no leverage, no excuses strong enough to break the steel in her voice. Good day, she said, and turned away from them. The men stood frozen in disbelief, their careers flashing before their eyes, and Cassandra walked right toward Adrian. He felt breathless. She had just pulled out of a deal worth more than he would ever earn in a lifetime. Because of him. For him. And he didn't know how to process that. You didn't need to do that, he said softly. It was too much. No, she said, her tone suddenly gentle again. They were too much. He searched her face for anger or regret, but found none. Only conviction. Only sincerity. Only something that felt dangerously close to personal. I read your pitch twice, she said. I studied every number, every structure, every risk. I saw your work clearly. You put your heart into it. Kay shifted uncomfortably, not used to being seen so clearly. I tried. You succeeded, she corrected. And that is exactly why someone didn't want you in that room. Her words sank deep, scattering pieces of a truth he didn't want to accept. That someone inside the company had waited for the perfect moment to break him, and they chose the moment he was shining brightest. That wasn't just firing, Cassandra continued. That was sabotage. Someone wanted your downfall. Adrian clenched his jaw. But why? Because you were becoming too important, she said. Too valuable, too difficult to overlook. He didn't respond. He couldn't. The truth stung because it made sense. And yet he hated that his best work had become a weapon used against him. Cassandra touched his arm lightly, guiding him toward a quieter corner of the hallway. I'm sorry you had to go through that. He shook his head. You don't owe me an apology. I know, she murmured. But I still feel it. Her voice warmed again, soft enough to melt something inside him. For a moment, they simply stood there, close enough to feel each other's presence. Close enough to sense a shifting energy neither of them had expected. The hallway buzzed with distant chaos, executives scrambling, phones ringing, whispers spreading, but none of it reached them. It felt like they had stepped into a bubble separate from the rest of the world. Adrian finally exhaled. Cassandra, I don't know what to do now. I've never been fired before. Especially not like that. My whole future feels uncertain. She squeezed his arm gently, offering quiet reassurance. Then let's figure it out together. He looked at her, surprised by the word together. You barely know me. Cassandra gave a small, meaningful smile. Then maybe I want to change that. Those words hung in the air like a promise. Unexpected, brave, a little dangerous, and strangely comforting. Come with me, she said after a moment. Let's get out of this building. You don't deserve to stand here while they argue about their own mistake. He hesitated. Where would we go? Somewhere quiet, she said, her eyes softening again. Somewhere you can breathe. There was something in her tone that made trust feel easy, natural. He nodded slowly, letting her lead the way. They walked down the hallway together, leaving behind the glass room that had turned into a battlefield moments earlier. Employees stared, confused by why the powerful client was walking beside the man who had just been fired. But Cassandra didn't care. And Adrian realized something as they stepped toward the elevator for the first time in a long time. Someone was walking with him, not against him. Someone believed him before hearing a defense. Someone saw his worth long before the company even tried. He wasn't sure where this moment would lead, or what tomorrow would look like, but one thing felt real. Cassandra wasn't finished with him. When Adrian stepped out of the elevator with Cassandra beside him, He felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. He had just lost his job, his stability, his plans for the future. Yet he didn't feel alone. Cassandra's presence kept his mind from spiraling into the darkness he expected. She walked with confidence and purpose, but there was softness in her steps now. A protectiveness he had never felt from anyone at work. They exited the building into the crisp afternoon air, and he finally let out a breath that had been trapped inside him since the moment Mara walked into the conference room. Cassandra paused on the sidewalk, scanning the street before turning to him. "There's a cafe nearby," she said softly. "It's quiet. We can talk there." He nodded, grateful she wasn't forcing him to go home alone with a storm still tearing through his thoughts. They walked side by side through the busy street, people rushing past them without realizing that Adrian's entire world had shifted. The city noise felt distant, like he was underwater. But Cassandra's presence grounded him. Every now and then, she glanced at him, checking his expression, making sure he was holding up. It was strange. Someone who didn't owe him anything was giving him more care in 20 minutes than his company had in 2 years. They reached a rooftop cafe tucked between two tall buildings. Cassandra led him up the narrow stairwell to a terrace overlooking the skyline. The city glowed in the afternoon sun, but Adrian felt like he was seeing it through a different lens. Everything brighter, sharper, yet heavier. They took a small table in the corner, away from other customers. Cassandra didn't speak at first. She watched him carefully, waiting for him to settle into the moment. He broke the silence. "I keep thinking this is some nightmare I'll wake up from." She leaned forward, eyes softening. It was cruel. No one should be treated that way. "It was planned," he said quietly. "You were right." She nodded. "Someone didn't want you succeeding today. You were becoming too visible, too important. That makes insecure people uneasy." He looked down at his hands, which were still trembling. "I thought loyalty mattered. I thought hard work meant something." Cassandra sighed, a long, thoughtful breath. "In good places, it does. In places run by fear, it becomes a threat." Her words sliced cleanly through the confusion clouding his mind. He lifted his gaze to meet hers. Somehow her calm strength helped him feel less lost. And then she said something he hadn't expected. "Tell me what you really want, Adrian. Not what the company wanted. Not what people told you to want. You." He blinked, taken aback. No one had ever asked him that. Not his bosses, not his colleagues, not even himself. He had always focused on what he should do, what he ought to do, what was expected. But what he wanted, that was a quiet thing he never made space for. "I want." He paused, searching for the right words. "I want to build something meaningful, something honest. I want to work somewhere people care about the work, not about power. Somewhere I'm not punished for doing well." A small, warm smile appeared on her lips. "Good. Now we're getting somewhere." He frowned lightly. "Why? What does it matter what I want? I don't even have a job anymore." "It's exactly why it matters," she said. "You free now? You just don't see it yet." Free, he had never thought of it that way. He felt lost, shaken, but free. That sounded like a story someone told when trying to comfort themselves. But somehow, when she said it, it didn't feel like a lie. It felt like a possibility. She leaned back, studying him for a moment. "I'm starting something new. A firm that actually values ethics, vision, and people. A place where ideas matter. A place where people like you can grow." His breath caught. "You're starting a new firm." "Yes," she said simply. "I've been planning it for months. But today confirmed something for me." He waited, heart beating faster. "I don't want to build it with people like them," she said, nodding toward the distant building they had just left. "I want people who have heart. People who believe in the work. People who create things that matter." Swallowed hard. "That sounds incredible. But I don't know where I fit into that picture." Cassandra held his gaze. "With me, Adrian. You fit with me?" The air between them shifted again, warm and electric. He felt that strange pull he had felt during the pitch, the connection he tried to ignore because he assumed it was one-sided. But now it wasn't. Now it was unmistakable. "You want me to work for you?" he asked quietly. "No," she said. "I want you to work with me. As a partner." His breath stilled. A partner. The word felt unreal, too big, too hopeful. He shook his head as if trying to clear it. "I'm just someone who got fired in a hallway. You're someone who built a $72 million proposal by yourself." Cassandra countered. "Someone who handled public humiliation with integrity. Someone who impressed me with his intelligence and his honesty." "You're not small, Adrian." They made you feel small. He didn't know whether he should believe her. But her voice was steady, sincere, without any hint of flattery or manipulation. She wasn't trying to soothe his ego. She was telling truth the world around him had ignored. He leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed by everything happening. Cassandra watched him with surprising patience, giving him space to process. The skyline shimmered behind her, golden light brushing the edges of her hair. She looked almost unreal in that moment, powerful, compassionate, determined, and sitting across from him as if this moment mattered just as much to her. "What if I fail?" he finally whispered. "You won't," she said softly. "But even if you do, you won't be alone." The words sent a deep ache through him. He had spent years carrying everything alone: pressure, fear, ambition, disappointment. The thought of not carrying it alone felt frightening and comforting at the same time. He let out a slow breath. "I don't know what to say." "Say what you feel," she replied. He hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I feel grateful, seen, and overwhelmed." Cassandra's expression softened even more. "Good. That means you're thinking with your heart, not just your fear." The waiter came by briefly, dropping off 2 cups of coffee Cassandra had ordered earlier. They didn't touch the cups. They barely noticed the steam rising between them. Their focus stayed locked on each other. Not romantically, not yet, but emotionally in a deeper, quieter way. After a moment, Cassandra reached across the table and placed her hand lightly on his. "I'm offering you a chance to start fresh. A place to rebuild, but stronger. You don't owe me anything, but I see what you could become if you had the right environment." He stared at her hand on his, feeling the warmth spread through him, grounding him. "And why me?" he asked, her eyes softened with something warm and dangerous, something honest. "Because your heart is in your work. And because you make people feel something when you speak. That matters more than titles or positions." A quiet sigh escaped him. He didn't realize how much he needed someone to say those words until now. His entire career had been built around proving himself to people who barely looked at him, barely listened. Yet Cassandra saw more in him in one day than his company had seen in 2 years. He closed his fingers around her hand gently. "Cassandra, I want to be part of whatever you're building. I want to start something real." Her smile grew, softer and brighter at once. "Then start it with me." They stayed like that for a long while, hands touching across a small cafe table, surrounded by the hum of a city that didn't know their worlds were changing. Their connection wasn't sudden. It had been forming quietly since the first moment he presented the pitch and she watched him with intent eyes. But now it felt undeniable as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Casting warm gold across the rooftop, the weight of what happened earlier began to fade. The humiliation, the anger, the heartbreak. It still existed, but it didn't define him anymore. It had opened a door. A painful door, but a necessary one. Cassandra broke the silence. "You didn't lose your future today, Adrian. You found a new one." He smiled softly, a real smile for the first time that day. "And I never expected it to look like this." She squeezed his hand gently. "The best things never look like what we expect." He felt the truth of her words settle into him. Warm, deep. Right as the city lights flickered on below, Adrian realized that everything he lost had been leading him here to this rooftop. To this woman, to this moment where he wasn't just broken, but rebuilding. And when Cassandra stood and extended her hand toward him, he took it without hesitation. Not because she rescued him, but because she believed in him. Long before he believed in himself, And that kind of belief was rare enough to build a new life on.